everyone. My name is Holger Seim. I'm the Director of Drama Studies at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. And I am here with Millie Hutton, Director of the fourth show in our main stage season, Christopher Marlowe's Edward II, which opens tomorrow, that's March 27th, and runs till April the 5th. Hello, Millie.
Hello, Holger.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you about Marlowe's great historical tragedy.
Me too.
The first time we've done a non-Shakespearean play from Shakespeare's period in quite a while.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about this and really looking forward to seeing it.
Great.
But this play is not only famous because it's one of the first sort of English history plays, and because Marlowe is by many considered to be the playwright that might have outperformed Shakespeare if he hadn't been killed in a tavern brawl. But it's also famous because it's arguably Edward II is arguably the first of queer, if tragic, queer hero.
Yeah.
It's the first of major Western play that deals with a love between men.
I don't think I know of one before it
Right.
that centers on it. No.
And I imagine that mattered in your approach to staging this.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. So I think originally it was not something I was going to direct, and then through circumstances we needed a new director, and I thought about it and I was like, wait a minute. Hold on a minute. This is a queer history and big battle between queer and the Catholic Church, and I think I know a lot about that. So I'm I'm really glad that it came my way, and it's for me it is really central to the play, fundamental to the play. I mean, there's still sort of, I don't know, in some academic circles and some historians still debate whether what kind of queerness Edward II may have lived inside of. But what I love is that Marlowe has no doubt, right? A play written in the 1500s, presumably one assumes by a queer man, just claiming it, not for a second sitting on the sidelines of what may or may not have been considered true at the time.
Right.
And so, I said to the cast, it's a history play being told from a very specific point of view, and that is the point of view of really a radical queer man at that time, and that's the story we're telling. And so I just kept coming back to Marlowe and Marlowe's point of view on the play. And for me, I mean, I mentioned to you early on that I wanted to keep it in period.
In period, yes.
I mean, it's not exactly in period, but I didn't want to do a contemporary version of it, quite simply just because I don't think when I was growing up, I don't remember ever seeing queer love or queer attraction being depicted in that kind of historical sense. Like, eventually, I guess I fell on some sketchings of Sappho or something, but I think, were I a young person in the theatre at that time and I had seen this play, I would have been very, very shocked and surprised and moved. So for me, I was like, I'm personally not inundated with historical images of two men or two women or trans or non-binary. Yeah. We're not saturated with those. So it was not a tired feeling for me. It felt fresh and important.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I did that. Having said that, I don't think I would be quite as interested if the nobles were being played by cis men. I really love that the nobles are being played by female identifying artists, because the sort of masculine toxicity has a bit of lift to it, because it isn't actually just that kind of thing that we are re-experiencing, if in fact it ever went away.
So, let me ask you then about since I don't know, I obviously know who's playing those roles, but I don't know how they're playing it.
Yeah.
So are the various nobles who oppose Edward and his lover, well, particularly Edward's lover Gaveston, are they in this production? Are they are those female identifying actors playing them more or less as noble women?
No,
or
as noble men.
Okay.
So they're the gender identity of the actor is not well, I've just contradicted myself actually. The fact that it isn't such a hammer on the nail, I think is really interesting. So they happen to be being played by 4 women who play 4 cis men.
Yeah. But that then generates a kind of distance between, like, if they were played by men, it would be all about masculinity.
Totally.
It would be sort of embodied masculinity, whereas this is sort of a portrayal of masculinity or something like that.
Yeah.
And therefore,
So you get an interesting kind of comment on it.
Yeah. Very Brechtian that.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's who also adapted Edward II.
I know
as
that.
one of his,
I have not read it though.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I should read it.
But okay, now let me circling back to the question of sort of Edward as a hero is, I think, the wrong word, right? But it seems that the play is kind of remarkably complex, actually, in its treatment of, like, the relationship between Edward and Gaveston and the sort of consequences of that relationship for the people around them as well, right? Like that Edward is married to a woman who kind of wants him to love her.
Definitely.
For at least half the play.
Definitely, she does.
Actively resists the extramarital affair that she eventually and then is almost kind of pushed into.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting and sort of unpredictable dynamic, I think, right? That it's not just about the love between these 2 men, but also the fact that Edward not behaving as he's expected to it comes at a price.
Yeah,
right?
well, I think, I think trying to avoid binary for all of the relationships has been important because Edward, Gaveston is Edward's primary love at the time that we meet Edward.
Yes.
Of course, historically, Edward did not die because of Gaveston, right? It came much, much later because of another man, or partly in because of that. So historically, it doesn't add up, and I think that he does in many ways love Isabella. Right. I don't think he doesn't, but she's just not his primary relationship at that point. So we've tried, there's definitely the way of looking at the play where Edward is very rejecting and quite violent against Isabella. And I've tried to avoid that because there are so few women in the play that I don't really think I needed to be hurling the only ones there are around the stage. So I definitely avoided that. But I think a lot of the queerness of the play isn't just about sexuality. It's about the turning upside down of what royalty might be, of what's expected of kings. How, for me, a lot of the queerness is in how can you be a free person inside of a very tightly structured environment. Yeah. So, that interests me as much as sexual preference.
Which, I mean, one could argue that, in some ways, what makes Edward an interesting person also makes him a bad king.
Terrible king.
Yes.
Terrible king. But does also have a love of it. Like when there's a scene in the play, as you know, where Edward is faced with giving up the crown. Yes. And I really love that scene and how he looks at what the crown means from so many angles. Some of it vanity, some of it expectation, some of it identity. Yeah. Some of it a trap, some of it, it's a really, really interesting scene about somebody who it's very easy to want, I think, to want to disturb things, but sometimes those things do bring you a lot of comfort. He also says early in the play, the only reason he really enjoys being king is to be able to give things to Gaveston.
Yes.
So, it is an interesting thing when you're faced with giving up your privilege.
Yeah.
You can break up the rules all you want, but sometimes you have to give up what you receive from it as well as privilege.
Right. Yeah. So everything comes at a cost, right, in this play.
Definitely.
It is interesting that moment also, like, it's almost like Edward is being stripped of everything, right, as the play goes on. Like, first he loses Gaveston.
Yeah,
he gets him back, he loses him, and he gets him back, he loses him permanently. And then this cascade of losing everything else follows.
Maggie Oman and I talked about it in the lighting, actually. There's a lighting cue where it's very subtle, but at the end of the cue, Edward looks kind of anemic. Like, we wanted to sort of try to have the power leave him in the lighting a little bit as well. So you and I were mentioning earlier, though, and this is important to me, I think maybe because I grew up in a country that certainly seemed more structured in terms of its class than I often find Canada. It doesn't mean I don't think there's class in Canada. There is, but the lines in England are drawn, I think, much more sharply, and so a lot of what the nobles are upset by is not necessarily gender, that it's a male lover, because I don't think that was new. It was just done less ostentatiously and less in their faces. And it's also that Gaveston is, in the nobles' opinion, just really low-born.
Yeah, a peasant.
And a peasant.
French peasant.
Yeah, and so that also threatens their position, that if he can come in and be treated like he was born, to the manner born, what does that mean to them?
Yeah.
And so we looked at that as well, a little bit in Gaveston's first costume, and trying to highlight that that they just is. I have Gaveston come on in a red coat, and because I was like, I kind of want a little bit red flag to a bull. They hate that he gets so bedaubed by the king, and I was like, let's just make it red.
Right.
Really in their face. So there's that element to it too.
Yeah, the class thing I think is fascinating, because Edward, it's not just Gaveston, right? It's like
he
likes Baldock and Spencer, like he likes people who are not nobles.
He likes working class people. There's a line where Baldock says, "Oh, I got my heraldry from Oxford, from education, not from my birth," and Edward says, "Oh, well, then you'll suit me better."
Right.
Like
Marlowe.
Yeah.
Like Marlowe himself.
Like Marlowe himself. Yeah. So I think that there's a lovely, for me, a kind of distaste for the nobility and what gets handed to you on a plate. You know, in that, certainly in that system in England, very strongly.
The problem, of course, being that Edward's own identity completely depends on having the crown handed to him on a plate, right? Like,
totally. Except the chances of him becoming king were so slim. Like, everybody died. He had sisters, which of course were not getting the crown at that time. But like, the chances, he was like kid number 8 or something of 14, or number 12 or 14, and then his older brother died, and he just ends up there, right? And I think there's also, you see that in Prince Edward, right? Where Prince Edward is like, I don't want to be king. Like, please sort it out some other way. I don't want to be a 15-year-old boy.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because he says something like, I'm not ready, right?
I'm not ready.
When his father wants to send him to France or something to negotiate. Like,
I don't want to go. I don't want to go. So as the mother of a 15-year-old, I find that really interesting, putting that sort of responsibility on someone. So there's so much in the play.
Yeah.
It's a big play. Like, it is I think what I have discovered is that we mentioned about that I teach realism so much, and it doesn't really work so well in this play. It's not a realistic play. Like, 1 minute, let's say, for example, the character of Kent, in a contemporary play, he changes allegiance so often that in a contemporary play, we would be expecting at least some backstory as to why or how do I make that turn. And, it really, in this play, you just make it. Right. Very bold, very clear. this is okay now, and then this is what I feel now. And so a lot of the acting has been about committing to the boldness of it, really.
Okay.
Turning on a dime in the middle of the sentence, rather than what we're often used to as contemporary actors, which is, here's my speech where I explain how I came to this point.
Right. Yeah, Marlowe doesn't write soliloquies like that.
Nope.
Like he doesn't do the thing that Shakespeare ends up doing. Of
Right.
Like,
explaining. Right?
Explaining.
There's not a lot of explaining. Even where to put the intermission, I was like, well, it kind of feels like it should come here, but then it could also come here. And if I don't do it there, then the Queen, they literally go to France to get the Queen. And the next scene, the Queen's like, oh, here we are in England.
Right.
And so I decided to put it between those two. But I was like, wow, I would love to have seen how it was originally performed. I wonder if really the actors just turned around and said, here we are in England, right?
But it's that thing that they do in early modern plays where they say, like when Oberon in Midsummer Night's Dream says, I am invisible.
Right.
That's all it takes.
That's
you just
all
say it.
Yeah. We have lots of that here, right? Where, as actors, we feel like it's a secret part of the scene, so we should be really quiet. And I said to the actors, we actually just believe that you can't see them.
Right.
Or that they can't hear you.
Yes.
It's just the way it works. You don't have to be sort of realistically quiet because you told us they can't hear you, and we believe you.
Right.
It's very interesting how that works.
Yeah, so let me ask you about that. Since, as the audience doesn't know, very often our productions are directed by external directors, and some of them are directed by faculty who also are professors at Sheridan and train our students throughout the 4 years they're here. And you fall into the latter category. So you've worked with these actors for years. And one of the foundational courses you teach is in realism, realist acting. And now you're directing a play that is very rigorously in verse and follows these patterns that you described that are really kind of, don't leave a lot of room for the kind of speed that realism sometimes seems to require. So what was that like? And
Well, I love it. I mean, while I teach realism, I think, and a lot of the bedrock of what has come to be expected for acting on TV, in Britain, North America certainly, is what we consider to be realism. But theatre's bigger than that, and it embraces so many styles that I kind of love it when it isn't that, because then you have to wrestle with, well, what have I settled into as, even for myself, what have I settled into as my own expectations of how theatre works? And how do I feel when I'm breaking them? And we've laughed, like sometimes I teach zone of silence and I teach realism. And sometimes I'm like, you're never going to find, it's just this thing and then this thing. And also pick up your cues.
Right.
So the play, it's an athletic play for actors. Like the drive that it takes alongside the heightened text, so it can't just be fast. Right? It's not just, it's about pace, right?
Yeah.
Pace being knowing when to be fast and when to slow down.
Yeah.
And so they've jumped in and they are swimming, and it's a big swim. They're gonna feel it in their muscles, right? They took 6 minutes off the play last night.
Whoa!
Which I wanted. And they committed to, and Act 1 was exactly as it should be, right? 4 minutes shorter. And I was like, that's it. Now we're in a play about politics and war.
Right.
Right.
And a really fast-moving play as well.
Really fast-moving. So I wouldn't say it's been hard. I'd just say it's been an athletic challenge. And for me, this has been a great experience because I don't usually do war plays or soldier things or 14 people on a stage. It's not necessarily my sort of natural wheelhouse. I tend to do the 7-play Ibsens or Chekhovs, and so it's been really
Carol Churchill's.
Carol Churchill was big, yeah, true. But this is not my usual type of play either, and so it's been great for me. I've had a really big artistic stretch as well.
how did you navigate? Like, so I mean, so the play has these big political scenes
Yeah.
and sort of these clashes between king and nobles and
Yeah.
and schemers and whatever. But then there are also these sort of really intimate scenes, right? Between Edward and Gaveston, between Isabella and
Yeah.
Edward, between Isabella and Mortimer, and so
Yeah.
on. That are does that sort of coincide with a change of pace or a change of?
A bit of a change of pace and lighting. Lighting has helped.
Yeah.
Really wide, so I'm making sure that I've tried to create islands that move and shift.
Yeah.
These stairs become hills, or they become different structures so that we can pick out smaller parts of the stage for more intimate moments. Yeah, because it's a bit like Wimbledon in here.
It's true. It's very, very wide. I don't think I've ever seen a set that made. I mean, this will not really be visible on camera, I think, but like it's a set that makes the space look extremely wide.
It's extremely wide.
It's cool. I mean, okay. I think we should probably end it there and let you get to dress rehearsal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to the show, and I hope to see many of you there.